Ma'am, you need to step aside. This ticket isn't valid for first class. The waiting area went quiet, dozens of eyes turning toward the counter. Sharon didn't raise her voice or pull rank. She just took a slow breath and set down her coffee, the way she'd learned to do in boardrooms where one negative reaction could derail everything. The agent, young, blonde, name tag reading Brittany, was already waving over her supervisor with the confidence of someone who thought they'd caught a scammer. What neither of them knew was that Sharon Bennett had just spent the last 6 months redesigning this airline's entire operational protocol, and she'd flown here to implement it. Sharon had deliberately dressed down for this trip. Jeans, a simple black blouse, comfortable flats, her natural hair pulled back in a low bun, no jewelry except small silver earrings, reading glasses tucked into her bag. She'd learned over 2 decades in aviation operations that traveling in business attire drew attention, and after a grueling week of stakeholder meetings in Seattle, she just wanted to get home to Chicago quietly. She'd checked in online, confirmed her seat, 2A, first class, paid for by the airline as part of her consulting contract, and headed to the gate with 40 minutes to spare. That's when it started. Brittany had scanned her boarding pass, frowned, scanned it again, then looked up at Sharon with barely concealed suspicion. This shows first class, but, she trailed off, eyes scanning Sharon from head to toe. Sharon knew that look. She'd seen it 1,000 times. The mental calculation. Does she look like someone who belongs in first class? Is there a problem? Sharon asked calmly. I just need to verify something. One moment. Brittany typed rapidly on her computer, brow furrowed. Sharon waited, patient. She'd dealt with worse. Other passengers in the priority boarding line shifted impatiently behind her. Ma'am, this ticket shows it was purchased with a corporate code, but I'm not seeing the authorization in the system. I'm traveling on business. The airline arranged my ticket directly. Which department issued it? Executive Operations. Brittany's eyebrows rose slightly, the universal expression of skepticism. I'm going to need to verify that. Can you step aside, please? You're holding up the line. Sharon moved to the side, watching as Brittany waved through the passengers behind her. A white businessman in a suit, an elderly white couple, a younger white woman with designer luggage. None of them were asked to verify anything. This is where things shifted. The supervisor arrived, a man in his 40s with the harried look of someone who'd been interrupted from something more important. His name tag read Kevin Marshall, lead gate supervisor. What's the issue? Brittany spoke quietly, but not quietly enough. This passenger has a first-class ticket that I can't verify. The corporate code isn't showing proper authorization. Kevin looked at Sharon, then at the screen. Ma'am, did you purchase this ticket yourself? No, it was purchased on my behalf by the airline's corporate travel department. Which airline? This one. Kevin's expression flickered between confusion and doubt. You work for us. I'm a consultant. I've been working with your executive team in Seattle this week. Do you have documentation of that? Sharon pulled out her phone and opened her email, showed him the itinerary sent by the VP of Operations assistant. Kevin squinted at it. I can't verify email correspondence at the gate. Do you have a company ID or letter of authorization? I'm a contractor, not an employee. I don't have a company ID. The authorization is in your system. It was booked through your own corporate travel office. Well, it's not showing up correctly. He handed her phone back. I'm going to need you to go to the ticket counter and have them reissue your boarding pass with proper documentation. Sharon checked her watch. Boarding had already started. The ticket counter was on the other side of security, a 20-minute round trip minimum. The flight boards in 10 minutes. I understand, but we can't allow passengers to board without proper verification. You're allowing everyone else to board without additional verification. Everyone else's tickets are showing correctly in the system. Then perhaps the issue is with your system, not my ticket. Kevin's expression hardened. Ma'am, I'm trying to help you, but you need to work with me here. I am working with you. I'm telling you the ticket is valid and was issued by this airline's own corporate office. And I'm telling you I can't verify that at this gate. So you need to step aside and resolve it at the ticket counter, or you won't be boarding this flight. The other passengers were watching now, some with sympathy, others with impatience, a few with the uncomfortable recognition that this might be about more than a ticketing error. Sharon felt the familiar weight of the moment. She could escalate, demand to speak to a higher supervisor, pull up her emails showing correspondence with the VP of operations, make it clear exactly who she was. But she'd learned that pulling rank often backfired for women who looked like her. It turned her into the difficult passenger, the aggressive woman, the person who thought she was special. So she stayed calm. I'd like to speak to your station manager, please. Kevin sighed. The station manager is dealing with an operational issue right now. Then I'll wait. Ma'am, you don't have time to wait. This flight is boarding. Then perhaps you should verify my ticket so I can board. I've explained that I can't do that. And I've explained that the ticket is valid. They were at an impasse. But that wasn't the moment that mattered most. Kevin made a decision. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the gate area until this is resolved. Sharon felt the words land like a slap. You're removing me from the gate. I'm asking you to resolve your ticketing issue at the appropriate location. I don't have a ticketing issue. I have a verification issue on your end. Ma'am, if you refuse to comply, I'll have to call security. The words hung in the air. The boarding area went completely silent. Sharon had been in aviation long enough to know what that meant. Airport security getting involved, even for something benign, created a record, a paper trail, the kind of thing that could get you flagged, delayed on future flights, or worse. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that this was happening because Kevin and Brittany looked at her and saw someone who didn't belong in first class. A middle-aged black woman in casual clothes, with no visible markers of status or wealth. Someone to be questioned, doubted, removed. She pulled out her phone and started recording. For the record, she said calmly, I'm a passenger with a valid boarding pass, purchased by this airline's corporate office for a business trip on behalf of this airline. I've provided documentation, and I'm being threatened with security removal while other passengers board without additional verification. I'm documenting this interaction. Kevin's face flushed. You can't record me without permission. I'm in a public space. I'm allowed to document my own experience. Put the phone away, or I will call security. Call them, Sharon said quietly. I'll wait. The businessman who'd boarded before her suddenly spoke up. Hey, I saw her ticket. It scanned fine. Why are you giving her such a hard time? Kevin turned to him. Sir, please board the aircraft. I'm just saying, you let me through without a second glance. Sir, board the aircraft now, or you'll be removed as well. The businessman hesitated, looked at Sharon with apologetic eyes, then walked down the jetway. Sharon understood. He tried, but he wasn't willing to risk his own travel to help her. Most people weren't. An older black woman in the boarding line spoke up. I've been watching this whole thing. You've been harassing this woman for 10 minutes while waving everyone else through. We all see what's happening here. Ma'am, please mind your own business, Kevin said. This is my business. I'm a paying passenger watching you discriminate against another passenger. No one is being discriminated against. This is a standard verification procedure. Then why haven't you verified anyone else? Kevin's jaw tightened. Last chance. Put away the phone and go to the ticket counter, or I'm calling security and you'll be banned from this flight." Sharon lowered her phone but didn't turn off the recording. "I'll go to the ticket counter," she said quietly, "but I want your names and employee numbers, and I want to file a formal complaint." "You're welcome to file whatever you want," Kevin said. "Employee information is on our name tags." Sharon took a photo of both their name tags. Then she walked away from the gate, knowing she was about to miss her flight. Behind her, she heard Brittany say to Kevin, "Some people just can't accept when they're wrong." Sharon kept walking, but she was already composing the email in her head. What she didn't realize yet was how fast this was about to unravel for them. The ticket counter agent, an older woman with 20 years of exhaustion written into her posture, looked at Sharon's boarding pass and frowned. "There's nothing wrong with this." "I know," Sharon said. "Then why are you here?" Sharon explained, the gate agent's suspicion, the supervisor's demand, the threat of security. The ticket agent's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something that looked like resignation. "Let me guess, Brittany Chen and Kevin Marshall." "Yes." The agent name tag reading Dorothy sighed heavily. "I'm sorry, this isn't the first time." "First time for what?" Dorothy didn't answer directly. "Your ticket is valid. It was issued through corporate travel with proper authorization codes. There's absolutely no reason you should have been pulled aside. Can you reissue my boarding pass with whatever verification they claim is missing?" "There's nothing missing, but I'll print you a new one with a supervisor override code if it makes you feel better, though you've already missed boarding." "They're still at the gate, if I hurry." "Gates closed. Flight pushed back 2 minutes ago." Sharon closed her eyes. Of course it had. "When's the next flight to Chicago?" Dorothy checked. 4 hours, but it's completely full. Best I can do is put you on standby." "What about other airlines?" "There's a United flight in 90 minutes with a few seats left in economy. I can get you on that if you're willing to pay the difference." "I'll take it." Dorothy processed the change, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. "I'm so sorry this happened. If you want to file a complaint, I can give you the customer service email." "I have it, but thank you." Dorothy handed her the new boarding pass, then lowered her voice. "For what it's worth, you handled that with a lot more grace than I would have." Sharon managed a tired smile. "I've had practice." She found a quiet corner near her new gate and pulled out her laptop, opened her email, and began typing. To Robert Chen at Midwest.com. CC Patricia Williams at Midwest.com. Legal at Midwest.com. Subject: Incident Report Gate 42, Seattle. Robert, I'm writing to document an incident that occurred this morning at C Gate 42. I was removed from my scheduled flight, MW 4782, after gate agents refused to verify my valid boarding pass and threatened to call security when I questioned their decision. The ticket in question was issued by your corporate travel department for my consulting work this week. I provided email documentation of my business travel authorization. I was still denied boarding, while other passengers were processed without additional verification. I have video documentation of the interaction, witness statements from other passengers, and a replacement boarding pass from your ticket counter, confirming my original ticket was valid. This cost me 3 hours of travel time and required purchasing a ticket on a competing airline. I'm attaching the incident details, employee names, and timeline. I'll follow up with a full report when I return to Chicago. I trust you'll handle this appropriately. Best, Sharon." She attached the video, the photos, and her documentation. Then she hit send. And waited. The response came 12 minutes later. "Sharon, I just watched the video. I'm appalled. I'm calling the Seattle station manager right now. Kevin Marshall and Brittany Chen will be suspended pending a full investigation. I'm also sending a company car to pick you up from O'Hare when you land. First-class ticket on us for your next 10 flights, and a formal apology from our CEO. This is inexcusable. I'm so sorry. Robert. Sharon read it twice. She'd worked with Robert Chen, VP of Operations, for 6 months now. He was direct, professional, and genuinely committed to improving the airline's culture. But she'd learned to be skeptical of promises made in the heat of embarrassment. Corporate apologies were easy. Systemic change was hard. She closed her laptop and headed to her new gate. What happened next wasn't loud, but it was decisive. Sharon landed in Chicago 5 hours later than planned, exhausted and frustrated. The company car was waiting, as promised. The driver was apologetic and professional. She got home, fed her cat, poured a glass of wine, and collapsed on her couch. Her phone buzzed. Robert Chen. She considered not answering, but professionalism won. Sharon, I'm so sorry to call you on a Saturday evening. It's fine, what's happening? I pulled all the documentation from this morning. Security footage, system logs, passenger statements. And I need you to know, this was even worse than your video showed. How so? Brittany flagged your ticket before you even approached the counter. She saw you in the boarding area and preemptively marked it for verification in the system. Sharon went still. She targeted me before I even checked in. Yes, and Kevin has a history. 3 complaints in the last 18 months, all involving passengers of color being removed from first class or premium boarding. Why is he still employed? Because the complaints were filed with customer service, not with HR or operations. They never made it up the chain. The system failed. Sharon took a long sip of wine. So what happens now? Full investigation. Both employees suspended without pay pending outcome. Mandatory bias training for all gate staff at that location. And I'm personally reviewing our complaint escalation process to make sure this doesn't fall through the cracks again. That's a start. It's not enough, and I know that, which is why I want to ask you something. Go ahead. Will you help us fix this? Not just this incident, but the systemic issues that made it possible. You've been consulting on operational efficiency, but we need someone who understands the cultural piece too. Someone who's lived it. Sharon was quiet for a long moment. Are you offering me a bigger contract? I'm offering you a position, VP of Operational Equity and Inclusion, newly created role, direct report to me. Real budget, real authority, real mandate to change how we do business. Robert, I know it's sudden, and I know you have every reason to walk away from us after today, but you're exactly who we need in this role, and if you say no, I'll understand completely. Sharon looked out her window at the Chicago skyline, thinking. She'd spent her career fixing broken systems, making aviation safer, more efficient, more functional. But she'd rarely had the authority to fix the cultural problems that made those systems fail the most vulnerable passengers. I need to think about it, she said. Take all the time you need, but Sharon, I mean it, we need you. After they hung up, Sharon sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about Brittany's smug confidence, Kevin's dismissive tone, the other passengers who watched but said nothing, and the one woman who spoke up. She thought about how many times she'd been in that position, questioned, doubted, dismissed, and how exhausting it was to constantly prove herself. But she also thought about the black woman at the gate, the ticket agent Dorothy, the passengers who would face the same treatment tomorrow and the day after if nothing changed. She opened her laptop and started drafting her response. This was where things shifted. Sharon took the job. Not because she forgave the airline, not because she thought one position could fix everything, but because she'd been given something rare, actual power to change the system that had hurt her. Her first day, she met with Robert and the executive team to outline her priorities. 1. Complaint escalation protocol. Any complaint involving discrimination or bias would be automatically flagged for executive review, not just customer service. 2. Mandatory bias training. Not the checkbox corporate kind. Real, ongoing, scenario-based training developed with input from affected communities. 3. Data transparency. Track and publish data on whose tickets get flagged for verification, who gets bumped from flights, who gets removed from aircraft. Break it down by race, gender, age. 4. Passenger Bill of Rights. Clear language about what verification is actually required and when additional documentation can be requested. Protections against pretextual removals. 5. Accountability measures. Employees with patterns of discriminatory behavior face consequences, not just training, real consequences. The executive team listened. Some nodded enthusiastically, others looked uncomfortable. The CFO asked the question Sharon had been waiting for. How much is this going to cost? Less than the lawsuits you'll face if you don't do it, Sharon replied calmly. Less than the PR disasters. Less than losing entire demographics of customers who are tired of being treated like criminals for buying a ticket. But in actual numbers, I'll have a budget proposal on your desk by Friday. She did. It wasn't cheap, but Robert pushed it through. 6 weeks after the incident, Sharon flew back to Seattle. Deliberately booked the same flight, same route, same time. She wore the same casual clothes, same comfortable flats, same low bun. She wanted to see if anything had changed. Brittany wasn't at the gate. She'd been reassigned to baggage services after the investigation found a pattern of targeting passengers of color. Kevin was gone entirely. Terminated after HR discovered he'd falsified documentation to justify previous removals. The new gate agent was a young black man named Marcus, who smiled warmly when Sharon approached. "Good morning, heading to Chicago." "I am." He scanned her pass. "You're all set, Ms. Bennett. First class, seat 2A boarding starts in about 15 minutes. Can I help you with anything?" "No, thank you." "Great, have a wonderful flight." That was it. No suspicion, no additional verification, no public humiliation. Just normal, professional service. Sharon found a seat and pulled out her phone. Checked the data dashboard she'd implemented. Since the new protocols went into effect. Verification requests down 67%. Complaints about discriminatory treatment down 81%. Passenger satisfaction among travelers of color up 34%. The numbers weren't perfect, but they were moving in the right direction. She boarded the flight when called. Settled into 2A. Pulled out her book. The flight attendant appeared, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes. "Ms. Bennett, I'm Claire. I wanted to introduce myself. I went through the new training program you developed. It completely changed how I see my job. Thank you." Sharon looked up surprised. "That means a lot." "No, thank you. I've been flying for 22 years and I'm embarrassed to say I didn't always see what I should have seen. Your training opened my eyes. I'm trying to do better." "That's all any of us can do." Claire smiled. "Can I get you anything before we take off?" "Just water, please." "Coming right up." Sharon watched her walk away, feeling something unfamiliar. Hope. Real, tangible hope that the system could actually change. Not overnight. Not completely. But enough to matter. 3 months into her new role, Sharon called a meeting with all Seattle Gate staff. She could have done it by video, could have sent a memo. but she wanted to be there in person. She stood in front of 40 employees, gate agents, supervisors, ground crew, and told them her story. Not with anger, with clarity. "I'm going to show you a video," she said. "It's from this gate 3 months ago." She played the footage of her interaction with Kevin and Brittany. The room was silent. Some people looked uncomfortable, others looked upset, a few looked ashamed. When it ended, Sharon spoke. "The woman in that video is me, Sharon Bennett. I'm now your VP of Operational Equity and Inclusion, and I want to be very clear about why I'm showing you this." She paused. Not to embarrass anyone, not to assign blame, but to show you what bias looks like in action. How it starts with an assumption, this person doesn't look like they belong, and escalates into public humiliation, missed flights, and broken trust. She clicked to the next slide. Kevin Marshall is no longer with this company. Brittany Chen was reassigned. But the problem isn't just two people. It's a culture that allowed this to happen repeatedly without consequences. She walked them through the data, the patterns, the complaints that had been ignored. Here's what's changing. You're going to receive ongoing training, not a one-time seminar, but regular scenario-based learning. You're going to be held accountable through data tracking, and you're going to have clear guidelines about when verification is appropriate and when it's pretextual. She softened her voice. "I know most of you come to work wanting to do a good job, wanting to help passengers, but good intentions aren't enough if the outcomes are harmful. You have to examine your assumptions, who you question and who you don't, who you trust immediately and who you make prove themselves." She looked around the room. "I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be aware, to notice your patterns, and to choose equity even when it's uncomfortable." A hand went up, a young woman, maybe mid-20s. "Ms. Bennett, I was here that day. I saw what happened. I didn't know what to do. I'm sorry." "What's your name?" "Angela." "Angela, thank you for that. Now let me ask you, what would you do today if you saw the same situation?" Angela thought for a moment. "I'd speak up, I'd ask questions, I'd document it and report it." "Good, that's growth, that's what we need." Another hand, an older man. "How do we know when to verify and when not to? I don't want to profile anyone, but I also don't want to miss something important." "Great question. The answer is, verify based on observable factors, not assumptions. If a boarding pass doesn't scan correctly, verify. If a passenger presents expired ID, verify. But if the only reason you're questioning someone is because they don't look like your mental image of a first-class passenger, that's bias, not security." The questions kept coming. Sharon answered them all, patiently, thoroughly. At the end, Dorothy, the ticket agent who'd helped her, approached. "Ms. Bennett, I just want to say, I'm glad you took this job. We've needed someone like you for a long time." "Thank you, Dorothy, and thank you for helping me that day. I should have done more." "You did what you could, that mattered." Not everyone was happy about the changes. Sharon started getting pushback, some open, some subtle. A senior pilot filed a complaint saying the new protocols were creating unnecessary delays. A gate supervisor in Dallas argued that the data tracking was making employees afraid to do their jobs. A VP from another division suggested in a meeting that Sharon was overreacting to one incident. She addressed each one calmly, with documentation. To the pilot, the average verification time has actually decreased by 40 seconds since we implemented clear guidelines. Would you like to see the data? To the Dallas supervisor, if your employees are afraid to do their jobs correctly, we need better training. If they're afraid to discriminate, that's working as intended. To the skeptical VP, this isn't about one incident. We've documented 247 similar complaints across our system in the last 3 years. Here's the breakdown. The resistance didn't disappear, but it got quieter. And the data kept improving. Section 12, the testimony. 6 months after Sharon took the position, she was invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee on transportation equity. She sat at a table in a wood-paneled hearing room, facing a panel of senators, and told her story again. This time to a national audience. Senator Patricia Warren from Massachusetts leaned forward. "Ms. Bennett, you said you were threatened with security removal while other passengers boarded without question. In your professional opinion, was this racial profiling?" "Yes, Senator." "How can you be certain?" Sharon pulled up a slide. "Because we tracked the data. In the 3 months before I was hired, Black passengers in first class were 340% more likely to have their tickets flagged for verification than white passengers. Latino passengers were 280% more likely. Asian passengers 160% more likely. And after you implemented your protocols, those disparities dropped by 78%. They're not gone. We're still working on that. But the improvement is measurable and significant." Senator James Mitchell from Texas frowned. "But isn't some level of verification necessary for security?" "Absolutely. But verification should be based on observable factors: ticket irregularities, documentation issues, behavioral red flags, not on whether a passenger looks like they belong in a premium cabin." "How do you distinguish between the two?" "Training, data, accountability. When we track who gets verified and analyze the patterns, bias becomes visible, and once it's visible, it can be addressed." Another senator asked, "What would you recommend other airlines do?" Sharon had her answer ready. 3 things. First, collect and publish data on whose tickets get questioned, who gets bumped, who gets removed. Transparency creates accountability. Second, implement clear guidelines about when additional verification is appropriate. Don't leave it to individual judgment. That's where bias hides. Third, create real consequences for patterns of discriminatory behavior. Training alone isn't enough. The hearing lasted 3 hours. When it was over, Sharon had a stack of business cards from other airlines, airports, and transportation agencies asking for her help. The work was spreading. 1 year after the incident, Sharon received an email from Brittany Chen. She almost deleted it. But curiosity won. "Ms. Bennett, I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. I wanted to apologize, not because I'm trying to get my old job back. I know that's not happening. But because I've spent this year thinking about what I did, and I'm ashamed. I told myself I was just following procedures, being thorough, doing my job, but the truth is I saw you and made assumptions. I decided you didn't look like someone who belonged in first class, and I treated you accordingly. I've been going to therapy, taking bias training courses on my own, reading books I should have read years ago, trying to understand how I became someone who could do what I did without even realizing it was wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just telling you that your experience changed me. I'm trying to be better. I'm sorry. Brittany." Sharon read it 3 times. Felt a complicated mix of emotions: anger at what had happened, skepticism about the apology, and something that might have been cautious hope. She thought about responding. Decided not to. Some apologies needed to be given, not received. Brittany's journey toward growth was her own responsibility. Sharon didn't owe her absolution. But she filed the email away, just in case it mattered later. 18 months into her role, Sharon's work expanded beyond just gate procedures. She implemented equity audits across all customer-facing operations, boarding procedures, upgrade algorithms, complaint resolution processes, loyalty program accessibility, hearing and promotion practices. Each audit revealed patterns, some subtle, some shocking. The upgrade algorithm, for instance, had been prioritizing passengers with high lifetime, correlated strongly with race and zip code, effectively creating a two-tiered system. The complaint resolution process routed disputes to different teams based on ticket class, meaning economy passengers got slower, less empowered responses than first-class passengers, even for serious issues. The hearing data showed that black applicants were half as likely to be hired for customer-facing roles, and a third as likely to be promoted to supervisor positions. Sharon presented all of it to the board with clear recommendations. Not all of them were implemented immediately, but more were adopted than she'd expected. And the culture was shifting. Slowly, imperfectly, but measurably. 2 years after the incident, Sharon was named one of Fortune's 50 most influential women in business. The article led with her story, the humiliation at the gate, the decision to fight back, the transformation of an entire airline's culture. Sharon Bennett didn't just file a complaint, the writer noted. She rebuilt the system that failed her, and in doing so made air travel more equitable for millions. Sharon was invited to speak at conferences, universities, corporate retreats. She said yes to about half of them. Always told the same story. Not as a victim narrative, but as a case study in systemic change. I wasn't special, she'd say. I was just someone who had the resources, the knowledge, and the authority to do something about a problem that affects countless people who don't have those things. The goal isn't for every black woman to have to become a VP to get treated with dignity. The goal is to change the system so that dignity is the default, regardless of who you are or what you look like. We're not there yet, but we're closer than we were. Sharon started a mentorship program within the airline. Paired junior employees, especially women of color, with senior leaders who could help them navigate the unwritten rules, advocate for their advancement, and support them through the inevitable challenges. One of her mentees was a young gate agent named Jasmine who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times. They keep saying I don't have enough experience, Jasmine told Sharon during one of their monthly meetings. But I've been here 5 years, and they promoted Tyler after 3 years and Marcus after 2. Did they give you specific areas to develop? No, just gain more experience. That's code, Sharon said. Let me look into it. She pulled Jasmine's performance reviews, compared them to the recently promoted agents, and found exactly what she expected. Jasmine's scores were higher across the board, but she'd been rated lower on leadership presence and customer confidence, subjective measures that often masked bias. Sharon called the hearing manager. Walk me through why Jasmine Washington wasn't promoted in the last cycle. She's good, but we felt she needed more seasoning. Her performance scores are higher than the 3 people you promoted. What specific skills is she lacking? A pause. I'd have to review the notes. I have the notes in front of me. They mention presence and confidence. Can you define those in measurable terms? Another pause. Not off the top of my head. Then I'm going to recommend Jasmine for the next supervisor opening. And I'm going to suggest we revise our promotion criteria to eliminate subjective language that allows bias to creep in. Sound good? Oh, yes, Ms. Bennett. Jasmine was promoted 6 weeks later. Sharon made a point of attending her first day as a supervisor. You earned this, she told Jasmine. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. I know, because you showed me that fighting the system doesn't mean you're difficult. It means you're paying attention. 3 years after the incident, Sharon took a flight from Seattle to Chicago. Same route, same airline, same gate. She arrived at gate 42 and stood there for a moment remembering. Remembering Brittany's sneer, Kevin's dismissal, the humiliation, the anger. And then remembering what had come after. The changes, the data, the policies, the people who'd been helped. The gate agent, a woman named Lisa, smiled when Sharon approached. "Ms. Bennett, it's an honor. We use your training videos in our onboarding. You're kind of a legend around here." Sharon laughed. "I don't know about that." "No, seriously. You changed everything. We all know the story, and we're trying to do better every day." "That's all I can ask." Sharon boarded the flight, settled into her seat, and pulled out her tablet. She had work to do, reviewing the quarterly equity metrics, preparing for a board presentation, drafting recommendations for the FAA on industry-wide standards. The work was never finished, but it mattered, and she was exactly where she needed to be. 5 years after the incident, Sharon's equity framework had been adopted by 4 other major airlines and was being considered as an industry standard by the FAA. She trained thousands of employees, influenced policy at the federal level, and helped create measurable change in how airlines treated passengers of color. But the moment she was proudest of came from a letter. A passenger, a young black woman named Keisha, wrote to tell her story. "Ms. Bennett, I'm a law school student. Last week I flew first class for the first time, a gift from my parents for passing the bar exam. I was so nervous. I kept expecting someone to question me, to ask for extra ID, to imply I didn't belong. But no one did. I was treated exactly like every other passenger, with respect, with professionalism, with the assumption that I had a right to be there. I know that's because of the work you've done. Because you didn't just accept being mistreated, you changed the system that allowed it. I don't know if I would have had the courage to do what you did, but I'm grateful you did. Thank you for making spaces like that safer for people like me. Keisha." Sharon kept that letter on her desk. On the hard days, when the resistance felt overwhelming, when progress felt slow, when she questioned whether any of it mattered, she read it. And remembered why she'd said yes to this job. Not for recognition, not for revenge, but for Keisha, and for every other black woman who deserved to move through the world without constantly proving she had a right to exist in it. Sharon Bennett never wanted to be famous for being humiliated. She wanted to be known for her work, for 2 decades of making aviation operations safer, more efficient, more functional. But the gate incident had given her something unexpected. A platform, a mandate. A chance to change not just operations, but culture. She'd used it. Not by shouting, not by shamming, not by seeking revenge, but by building systems that made dignity the default instead of something you had to earn with the right credentials, the right clothes, the right skin color. 5 years later, the data showed the impact. Complaints of discriminatory treatment down 89%. Passenger satisfaction among travelers of color up 52%. Employee diversity up 34%, with particular growth in supervisory and management roles. The numbers told one story. But Sharon knew the real story was in the moments that didn't make it into metrics. The black businessman who boarded first class without a second glance. The Latina mother traveling with her kids who wasn't questioned about whether she could afford her tickets. The Asian college student who used the bathroom without being followed. The Muslim woman whose headscarf didn't trigger additional screening. These were the victories. Quiet, undramatic, unreported. But real. And they mattered more than any recognition or award. Sharon thought sometimes about that day at Gate 42. About the choice she'd made to document instead of explode. About the privilege of having the knowledge and resources to fight back in ways that created change. About all the people who'd experienced the same thing but didn't have her platform. She thought about Brittany and Kevin, their assumptions, their confidence, their complete inability to see what they were doing. And she thought about how many Brittany's and Kevins were still out there, in gates and offices and institutions across the country, making the same assumptions, causing the same harm. The work wasn't finished. It would probably never be finished. But it was further along than it had been. And that was enough. Because Sharon Bennett hadn't come to make a scene. She'd come to make a change. And she had. Not by raising her voice, but by raising the standard. They thought she was just another passenger to dismiss. They didn't know she wrote the operations manual they were supposed to follow. They didn't know she'd spent 23 years analyzing the systems they took for granted. They didn't know that humiliating her would cost them their jobs and transform an entire industry. But that's the thing about quiet competence. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It just does the work, fixes the systems, opens the doors, and leaves them open for everyone who comes after. Sharon Bennett didn't raise her voice that day at Gate 42. But she changed the entire conversation. And 5 years later, millions of passengers were moving through airports with a dignity they didn't even know someone had fought for. That's not revenge. That's legacy. Quiet, powerful, lasting. The kind that doesn't need applause. Because the work speaks for itself. You don't need to shout to create change. You need clarity, documentation, strategy. And the willingness to use your authority, not to punish, but to rebuild the system that failed you. That's not anger. That's architecture. And it lasts longer than any viral moment ever could.